Imagine sitting by your father's hospital bed, the steady rhythm of monitors and the hiss of machines keeping him alive. Then, out of nowhere, someone barges in and tries to shut it all off. And not just anyone. A woman with no medical authority, no family ties, but the president of your neighborhood, HOA. Yes, the very same person who spends her days obsessing over grass length and mailbox paint suddenly decided she had the right to decide whether my dad lived or died. This isn't just a story about petty neighborhood squabbles. It's about how far one self-appointed enforcer of trivial rules pushed things, and how close we came to losing my dad before hospital security, and eventually the police were forced to step in. Let me take you back to how it all began. Father had been admitted to the ICU after a sudden heart attack. It had already been a week. His condition was fragile, touch and go, but the doctors were still hopeful. He was sedated, attached to life support, and every beep of the machines was a reminder that modern medicine was giving him a fighting chance. For us, those sounds were a lifeline of hope. But for someone else, apparently, they were nothing but a nuisance. That someone else was Karen, the HOA president. If you've ever dealt with a Karen, you know their obsession with control has no limits. She'd lived across the street from us for years and had found fault with nearly everything. Our fence height, the cracks in our driveway, even how my dad parked his truck. But none of those little power trips prepared me for what she would do in a hospital ICU. At first, it didn't seem alarming. On the second day, I noticed her pacing outside the hallway near my dad's room. I figured maybe she was visiting another patient, but when she caught my eye, she smiled. That same smug, tight grin she'd use when taping violation notices to people's doors. My stomach sank. "Your dad's on life support?" she asked flatly, as if she had the right to know. "Yes," I answered curtly. I didn't owe her an explanation. She tilted her head and said, "Don't you think that's a bit unnecessary?" Her tone wasn't sympathetic. It was the same scolding tone she used when someone left Christmas lights up too long. I honestly thought I misheard her. Who says something like that? I brushed it off, chalking it up to Karen being her usual self. But then she kept showing up, every single day. Hovering outside the ICU wing, standing around like she was waiting for someone, always watching. I didn't realize it at the time, but she was planning something. Something much darker than HOA fines or nasty letters. By the fourth day, it was impossible to ignore. She wasn't just lingering anymore, she was lurking. Anytime I stepped out for a coffee or walked down the hall, there she was. Sometimes, she pretended to be texting. Other times, she'd strike up pointless conversations with nurses, but her eyes were always fixed toward my dad's room. At first, I wondered if maybe I was being paranoid. Stress can do that. Maybe she really did know someone in the ICU. But then one of the nurses pulled me aside. "Do you know that woman?" she whispered. I sighed. "Yeah. She's our HOA president." "Why?" "She keeps asking about your father's condition," the nurse explained. "Questions like how long he'll be on life support and whether your family gave consent. It's unusual." Unusual was putting it lightly. My father's medical situation was none of her business. Yet there she was, digging like she had some kind of right to know. Later that evening, I confronted her, and instead of denying it, she crossed her arms, lifted her chin, and said, "Someone has to make sure resources aren't being wasted. Those machines are expensive. If he's not going to recover, the responsible thing would be to let him go." I was stunned. My dad was literally fighting for his life, and this woman, who wasn't a doctor, wasn't family, wasn't even a friend, was speaking as if she got a vote in whether he lived or died. "Stay away from him," I snapped. "You have no authority here. But if you know anything about Karens, you know that telling them no only fuels them more." Over. The next 2 days, her behavior escalated. She followed doctors during their rounds, trying to overhear updates. She attempted to slip into restricted areas, pretending she was family. Twice, hospital security escorted her out, but she always found her way back inside. The breaking point came on the 7th day. I had stepped out to call my mom when suddenly alarms blared from my father's room. I rushed back in to see Karen inside, hands on the ventilator, tugging at the cords. "He wouldn't want this," she screeched, her voice echoing down the hallway. "He's a burden on the community." In an instant, nurses lunged to restrain her, and security stormed the room. My chest was pounding as I shoved past them, terrified that she'd managed to harm him. Thank God the machines were still intact. My father was still alive. But the chaos wasn't over. Karen was screaming, thrashing, kicking at medical trays. "You're wasting everyone's money," she howled. "He should have been gone days ago. I'm the HOA president." The ICU had erupted into pure bedlam. Alarms blaring, nurses scrambling, officers rushing in, and my father's heart monitor beeping in frantic rhythm with my own pulse. "I have a say!" Karen shrieked, her voice splitting the air. Security guards closed in, but she fought like a wild animal. She clawed, kicked, and even snapped her teeth at one of them in a desperate attempt to break free. A nurse tugged me back into the hallway, worried I'd get pulled into the chaos, but I couldn't look away. This wasn't just another HOA spat over garbage bins. This was life and death. Within moments, 2 hospital security officers had her cornered, trying to restrain her arms, but Karen thrashed, twisting violently, spitting venom at anyone within reach. "I'll sue this place," she bellowed. "You can't keep me out. He signed community agreements." The words were pure nonsense, but the fury in her eyes was unmistakable. Then, finally, police arrived. 2 officers stormed down the corridor, radios buzzing, hands already resting on their belts. Relief washed over me like a wave as they pushed into the room. "Step back, now," one officer commanded. Karen froze for a beat, then shifted tactics. The rage on her face melted into fake tears. "You don't understand," she wailed. "I'm just trying to do what's best for everyone. That man is draining resources. He doesn't deserve—" "Ma'am, stop talking and comply." The officer cut her off. His tone was flat, firm, leaving no room for argument. When she refused, they moved quickly. In a single motion, they seized her arms, spun her around, and snapped handcuffs onto her wrists. The metallic click was the sweetest sound I'd heard all week. Karen shrieked again, her voice ricocheting through the sterile halls. "You can't arrest me. I'm in charge here. I'm in charge." But she wasn't. For the first time since this nightmare started, someone had finally shut her down. As the officers dragged her down the ICU corridor, patients peeked nervously from their rooms. Nurses exchanged glances of weary relief. I stepped back into my father's room, trembling as I checked the machines. Still steady, still working. My dad was safe. But the damage had already been done. Our privacy shattered. Our trust in hospital security shaken, and Karen's obsession laid bare for everyone to see. And even in cuffs, she wasn't finished. As she was dragged toward the exit, she kept screaming, her voice carrying down the hall like a banshee's cry. "You'll regret this. He doesn't belong here. I'll take this all the way to court." The officers didn't flinch. They walked her straight through the lobby, past shocked families, and out the automatic doors. Her shouts swallowed by the night air. Only then did the ICU seem to exhale. Alarms silenced, nurses regrouped, and my father's room settled back into its steady rhythm of beeps. But inside me, the anger still burned. This wasn't just a neighbor with too much time on her hands. This was criminal. The officers returned to gather statements. One of them, a tall man with tired eyes, shook his head. "I've seen some strange things," he admitted, "but never someone trying to tamper with life support over community rules. It sounded absurd, but it was terrifyingly real. If security hadn't been there in time, my dad might not have survived." That night, we pressed charges. So did the AD. Hospital. Trespassing. disorderly conduct, attempted interference with medical equipment. The list piled up. Karen spent the night in jail. By morning, she was officially banned from the hospital grounds, but the ripple effect spread far beyond the ICU. Word raced through the neighborhood. People who once tolerated Karen's constant harassment finally saw her for what she truly was. Some were horrified. Others were quietly relieved to watch her face consequences. At the next HOA meeting, yes, she actually tried to run one from her lawyer's office, half the board walked out. Residents petitioned to remove her permanently. Within weeks, Karen was stripped of her position, left with nothing but court hearings and mounting legal bills. For my family, the scars were harder to erase. We couldn't unsee her lunging for my father's ventilator, couldn't unhear her screaming about wasting resources as if his life were just another lawn ornament that violated her precious standards. But out of the nightmare came something good. Neighbors we barely knew rallied around us. Meals appeared at our door, cards piled in. People stopped treating the HOA as some untouchable authority and began questioning just how much power one person should ever hold. And my dad, after long, grueling weeks in the ICU, he pulled through. Slowly, steadily, he regained his strength. When he finally came home, he settled into his favorite chair on the porch, gazed across the street at Karen's now empty house, and shook his head. "All that fuss," he murmured, "just because I parked my truck the wrong way." And then, after a pause, he added something that stuck with me. Sometimes the ones who crave power most are the least fit to have it. And sometimes justice doesn't just come from a judge. It comes when a community finally decides enough is enough. If you enjoyed this wild story, make sure to hit that like button. Drop a comment with your thoughts on this insane HOA Karen. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you'll be first in line for the next unbelievable story.